Hi class, this is your instructor, Skylar Huff, and welcome to Chapter 29, all about fungi. So as we get to this chapter, I'll just say please keep in mind that you all should be preparing for your test. And as you all do prepare for the test, let us begin with our first chapter of the semester, or at least our first chapter for this test. So mushrooms, morels, and truffles, those are delights of the gourmet. They share recent common ancestry with baker's yeasts, black bread mold, and that's what you might see forming on stale bread or even hereafter a recent hurricane, having had water damage via by flood or storm surge, or even by a tree falling on a house or even some other structure and allowing rainwater to come in. That also includes the mildew that collects in that damp shower curtain. So if you happen to see any of that there, please clean up directly. So where we're going with this, in case you just haven't noticed, is that fungi are all around. And with them being all around, this is called that science of mycology. So you may very well notice that the prefix is going to be myco, that you'll see throughout the chapter. So mycology is that study of fungi, and it is concerned with all of these diverse life forms. So with that being stated, mycologists have described an approximate 100,000 species, most of which are terrestrial, with an estimated 1.5 million species of fungi. So there is a lot yet still to discover. So if any of you are there and have not yet determined or made that decision on what your major may very well be, please come over to biology. There is mycology to, of course, explore and discover. So biologists who use the kingdom as a taxon group of these organisms in kingdom fungi. And it's one of those eukaryotic kingdoms. So fungi grow best in moist habitats, but they are found universally wherever organic material is available. Requiring that moist environment to grow, they can obtain water from a humid atmosphere, as we do experience here in South Alabama, as well as from the medium on which they live. So when the environment becomes dry, fungi can survive by going into a resting stage, or by producing spores that resist desiccation. And what you will find out that desiccation means is drying out, as you all see above on page 603 with, of course, those puffballs, or at least those collared earth stars as they're referred to, releasing, of course, those microscopic spores shown here on the screen before you. So some fungi grow to be an enormous size, and in fact, in Washington State, a fungal clone has been identified that covers more than 1,500 acres. The giant fungus, which is mainly on the ground, developed from one spore that germinated more than 1,000 years ago, class. So the fungus has fragmented and is no longer one continuous body today. So like prokaryotes, most fungi are decomposers that obtain nutrients and energy from that dead organic matter. They are vital members of the ecosystem because they break down the organic compounds found within dead organisms, leaves, garbage, sewage, and other waste. When they decompose organic compounds, carbon and other elements are released into the environment where they are recycled. So many fungi form vital symbiotic associations. For example, most terrestrial plants have fungal partners that live in close association with the roots. And the fungi help these plants obtain phosphate ions and other needed minerals in the soil. In exchange, however, the plants provide the fungus with organic nutrients. And then some fungi live symbiotic within algae and cyanobacteria as lichens. And others are parasites and pathogens that cause disease in animals or plants. So with this brief introduction, I hope you now have a better understanding of where we're going. And if you have a question, write that question down and be sure, of course, to email me. So getting to where we're going, let's continue on. So my question for you here is what is this and why is it where we see it? So I hope you would have said that yes, that is a mushroom. And if you haven't yet noticed, yes, that mushroom is actually in the apartment complex. So one time I was living in an apartment, and I woke up one morning and I found this had, of course, grown. So the question is asked, how on earth did that get there? Well, I'll help you out. What had happened was, at the time I was, of course, conducting research. And the research that I was conducting was, of course, occurring outdoors. I was in the woods, sun up to sundown. And apparently, when I came in one day, I must have had something on me called a spore. That spore had eventually gotten to this area. And as that spore got to that area, with a bit of moisture, it, of course, allowed this mushroom to then form and grow. So ultimately, we had to get out of the apartment, at least for that day, so they could come in and clean the area. But I was utterly amazed to see a mushroom in the apartment on an early morning. So let's begin the chapter here formally. So yes, fungi were once grouped with plants, and they were grouped with plants until it was then discovered that they have characteristics that are different from plants. So what's included here, class and kingdom fungi, are just these examples being shown. So I'll add to the list, class, the yeasts, rusts, and smuts, the things class already mentioned. So what a fungus is what we're getting at now. So if you're not with me, please get with me, class. We're here on page 604, into those basic characteristics of fungi. So all fungi are eukaryotes. They are eukaryotic heterotrophs, so that their cells contain a membrane, of course, enclosed nucleus. They have also mitochondria and other membranous organelles. So with this, let's get to some of those other key characteristics. So most fungal species live in areas with a pH that ranges from about a 5.6, but then again, depending on the fungal species, the pH could range, class, from that 2 to 9. So they live, class, in not just those acidic areas, but also, class, alkaline areas. And many fungi are less sensitive to high osmotic pressure than bacteria, resultant of which that they can grow, meaning fungi can grow in concentrated salt solutions or in sugar solutions such as jelly, which discourage or prevent bacterial growth. And then, of course, fungi can also thrive in a variety, class, of temperature ranges. So even refrigerated food, which you all likely have right now, can have fungi. So, as already mentioned, class, the fungi are heterotrophic, and it's for nutrition. So therefore, their nutritional and energy needs, they depend on preformed carbon molecules produced by other organisms. So fungi do not ingest food, then digest food as we as animals do it. Instead, class, they infiltrate the food source and secrete digestive enzymes onto it. So digestion, class, in fungi takes place outside of the body. So when complex molecules are broken down into smaller compounds, the fungus then absorbs the pre-digested food into its body. So the fungus is very efficient, class, in absorbing nutrients and growing. So it rapidly converts those nutrients into new cell material, and if excessive amounts of nutrients are available, the fungi, class, then store them, and is usually classed as lipid droplets or even as glycogen. And I find that utterly amazing because that's the very same way we do. We store, class, the excess as glycogen in our liver and skeletal muscles. So next up, class, I'll refer to the cell walls. So yes, fungi, class, do have cell walls. And the cell walls of fungi are made of chitin. That's chitin. Chitin is a carbohydrate. So this polymer, class, consists of subunits of nitrogen, and they contain sugar. So yes, the cells of fungi, class, are like that of bacteria, some protists, and even plants. However, class, the cell wall here is different from that you all will find in plants. So chitin is also a component of the external skeleton of insects, which you all may not have gotten to quite yet, or may have. And of course, it's there to, of course, ensure that it resists the breakdown by most microorganisms. The chitinous cell wall is. So most fungi, class, are multicellular. However, the yeasts, class, I would say, are an outgroup in that they are unicellular with that round or oval shape. Yeasts are widely distributed, class, in the soil, and you could also find them, class, on leaves, fruit, and even cured meats. And you also, class, can find them in and inside our bodies. So importance, class, of yeast ranges from, class, biological research, which has been done a lot of. You can find it in medicine, class, and even the food industry, which we will later get to. So with that being the case, I'll now continue on, class, to how fungi get their nutrients. So I'll start here, class, by getting to this thing known as a hypha or hyphae. So the body of the fungus consists of a long, branched, thread-like filament known as, class, a hypha. And as I mentioned, class, the hypha, what I'm referring to is those extensions, class, of the cell, those cellular extensions. So just make sure, if you need to pause what we're doing here, class, just pause it at your leisure. I'm going to continue on now from where I am in this presentation. So this is where I just finished, class, and I'll get back to part of this right now. So what happens, class, is that the hypha consists of that tubular cell wall, and it surrounds, of course, the plasma membrane of the fungal cells. So they are an adaptation to the fungal mode of nutrition, and their growth occurs with the tips of the hyphae. So as the hyphae elongate, what then happens is that fungus, class, grows and infiltrates the food source. So the fungus then absorbs those nutrients, class, through its very large surface area. So as the hyphae grow, they form this tangled mass or tissue-like network. And that tissue-like network, class, is known as a mycelium. So it's this mycelium, class, that fungi form that's commonly referred to as being a mold. So to kind of take you to where I am, I said yes, a mold, class, can be referred to as a mycelium, which is composed, class, of course, many, class, hyphae. So this cobweb-like mold, sometimes is seen on bread, is that mycelium of a fungus. So what is not seen, class, is the extensive mycelium that grows into the bread itself. So depending on the environmental conditions, some fungi, class, can alternate between, of course, a yeast phase and the phase in which they produce hyphae. So to help you with this, let's get on down to septated hyphae and, of course, non-septated hyphae. All right. So most fungi have hyphae that are divided by cross walls or septa, and it gives them, class, those individual cells that contain one or more nuclei. So to get to this, I'll show in this figure, class. You see in your textbook is figure 29.1, showing that fungus body plan. So I'll begin here, class, with A. That, class, is the mycelium. And I have that in my refrigerator right now. No, that's not from my refrigerator. The picture is not, but it's in my refrigerator right now at the house. But what you're seeing, class, is the mold, made up, of course, from that, I guess you could say, the mycelium, class, seen here in 29.1b. So let's go to 29.1c. So here, class, is showing you that the hypha is divided, class, into those individual cells with one nucleus, class, per cell. So, of course, you could say that would be a hypha that, of course, is septate, or at least has those individual, I guess you call those septums. However, if you get down, class, to 29.1e, you then see, class, a hypha that is known as being coenocytic. So a coenocytic hypha is, of course, one that lacks, class, any septa at all. So, of course, that entire cell, class, has, of course, many nuclei per cell. So as it says that, it's just that. They lack septa. So in these species, there's, of course, the nuclear division is not followed by a cytoplasmic division, resulting, class, in that coenocytic fungus, and it's elongated with multinucleated, of course, giant cells, or a giant cell. So let's get down to fungal reproduction. Most fungi, class, reproduce by means of microscopic spores. So those are those reproductive cells that can develop into new organisms. So in most groups, spores are non-motile, most groups of fungi, and they're dispersed, class, in a number of ways, be it, class, by animals or even myself walking into the the apartment complex and getting into the apartment itself and having spores class off the genes, or even class by way of water and even wind. So the air we breathe class is filled with hundreds of thousands of fungal spores. So even when you go to a store, I did say store class, and you purchase, let's just say bread. Let's go and make it the most specific. I've bought bread from a store you've likely been to, and I didn't even open the bread package. I hope you all know what happened next. The bread class became moldy, and I did not even class open up the package. So that just gives you, I hope it gives you a better idea as to what I'm referring to by stating, class, that yes, fungal spores are literally everywhere, even if, class, you purchase this or purchase that and don't even, class, open up the package. So when the spore class germinates, it gives rise to a hypha, which develops, class, into the mycelium, as we just saw, and even see here, class, at the bottom right. And from that occurring, class, it's then, yes, there. So what I'll get to nextly is I'm going to get this pen mark off the slide and continue. So fungi produce spores either sexually class or asexually, and we'll get more to this class with each individual group, which is to come later. So with asexual reproduction, class, and new individuals are produced quickly. I say again, with asexual reproduction, new individuals are produced quickly, such as seen, class, in the picture I showed you from the apartment. But there is, of course, little genetic variability. So with sexual reproduction, class, it does indeed involve meiosis, and this generates new genotypes, and of course provides that means by which, of course, change over time can occur, and the fungus class can very well become, I guess you put it as being more fit. So spores are usually produced, class, on this specialized aerial hyphae or in fruiting structures. So in position, class, up above ground, those spores can be easily dispersed. So the structures, class, within which spores are produced are known as sporangia. So if you look closely here, class, that at the very tip is known, class, as the sporangium. And of course, the sporangium is the point at which, class, those spores are produced. So you will go, class, from that diploid to that haploid state. So the area hypha of some fungi produce spores in large, complex reproductive structures known as fruiting bodies. So the familiar part of the mushroom, class, is that large fruiting body. So we do not normally, class, see the bulk of the fungus, which, of course, a nearly invisible mycelium is what is buried, class, out of sight and rotting the material, class, in the soil on which it grows. So it's not so much, I guess I'll say, that you see everything when you see the fungus, when you see the mushroom. It's, class, going to be beneath that surface of the ground, that most of which is there. So from here, what I'll get to nextly will be about the asexual reproduction class of fungi. So yeasts, class, reproduce by way of budding. And it's an asexual process, class. So they form those buds and they pinch off, class, from the parent cell. So many species of multicellular fungi also reproduce asexually. And with that, the spores are produced by mitosis, then released, class, into the air or water. So conidiophores, which we'll get to a little later, are specialized hyphae that produce asexual spores called Conidia. And I say again, we will get to this later. So it's just that arrangement of Conidia, class, on the conidiophores. They vary, class, from species to species. I won't get to dikaryotic hyphae at the moment, but what I will get to nextly, class, is fungal diversity. So Systemicists, class, now view fungi as being more related to animals, class, than to plants. I'll do a quick diagram, and I drew it a little too high. Draw it again. So I'll make a quick diagram here, class, and I think it may make a bit more sense upon drawing this. So time, class, is going from that left to right direction. So I'll put here first, class, plants. And then I'll put fungi. And then hereafter, I'll put animals. So as I've just stated, class, we are more closely related, class, to fungi than we are plants. And you may say, but that's obvious. Well, I don't know how it's obvious, but I find it, class, utterly amazing to see just how related we are, class, to a fungus, class, than it is, of course, to the plant. So I won't do a lot class with fungal evolution, but just keep in mind that there are fossilized fungal spores that have been found class in amber more than 225 million years old, and those fossils of hyphae associated with the cyanobacteria or algae have been dated class to be more than 550 million years old. And there are a few large fungal fossils, such as mushrooms, that have been found too. So just keep this all in mind as we continue on, class. So let's get to those diverse groups of fungi. We'll go through this together, class, with those 5 groups. But keep in mind, class, that most of those named fungi, class, are members of the Basidiomycetes class from Basidiomycota. And that includes, class, what are known as the club fungi. So as you can see here, class, in figure 29.5, this cladogram is just of that currently recognized groups of fungi. And do, class, pay attention to those synapomorphies. Yes, I did say, class, synapomorphies. And the first of which will be the loss of the flagellum. Thereafter, class, will be the evolution of the dikaryotic stage. And lastly, the evolution of the Ascospores. And then lastly, class, the evolution of Basidiospores. So let's begin, class, with the chytrids from Chytridiomycota. So these, and as I go through this class, just keep in mind that I'm not going to be able to ask you everything about any topic this semester. So what I would say you should concern yourself with, class, are those features that make each of these 5 groups unique. So with the chytrids, class, it states that they have flagellate spores. And these, yes, are the only fungi class with flagellate cells. So that does mean that we would find these, class, in water. So the chytrids, class, they are small with relatively simple fungi, and they inhabit, class, ponds and even damp soil. And a few species have been found, class, in salt water. But most of these chytrids, class, are decomposers, and they degrade, class, organic matter. But a few of these, class, cause disease in plants and even in animals. So with that, there is a parasitic chytrid that has been partly responsible for the declining amphibian populations. And of course, infected frogs have also been identified in parts of the world. So just keep in mind, class, that yes, it is fungi that can definitely, class, affect not just humans, but also, class, some amphibian populations. These are the chytrids, class. Up next, we have what is known as Zygomycota. And before I go too fast, on page 608, class, I love the table 29.1. This can help you, class, in one spot, see the differences in those 5 different fungal groups. So Zygomycota. So as we are here, class, yes, it states this is not a monophyletic group, so there's not a most recent common ancestor that includes all of the descendants here, meaning it's not monophyletic. So yes, these yet still are decomposers. But with them being decomposers, they do sometimes, class, I guess I'll say, live in the soil or on decaying plant or animal matter. So with that, some do form, class, symbiotic associations, such as the mycorrhizal relationships with plant roots. So a few species do indeed, class, cause disease in plants and animals, and including, class, humans. So what I'll get to now, class, is I'm going to give you a way to contrast the types of spores that are created. So yes, there are spores, and the asexual spores of Zygomycota, class, are simply just known as those, I guess you call them sporangia, and they're necessarily just called spores. So yes, sporangia, class, produce spores. This happens, class, asexually, from end to end. However, class, the sexual spores of Zygomycota are known as zygospores. So, of course, the zygosporangia. So it's that sexual reproduction, class, that produces those zygospores, and that all, class, comes from the zygosporangia. So what happens here is, when these are produced, class, is it states those zygospores can remain dormant until, of course, the area is conducive, class, for reproduction. So the most, I would say, likely most familiar species of Zygomycota, the Zygomycete class, is going to be black bread mole, Rhizopus stolonifer, which you all will see in lab. So yes, it's a decomposer, class, that breaks down bread and other foods. So if preservatives are not added, class, bread left at room temperature for just a few days becomes covered with that black fuzzy growth. Hence, preservatives, class, are in foods. In the event that you, of course, bake and you bake your very own bread, you will see this class very soon thereafter. So what I'm getting at nextly here is that the bread becomes moldy when a spore falls on it, then germinates and grows into the mycelium, which I'm confident, class, you understand what I'm referring to. I have a picture coming, class, here shortly. So the hyphae class penetrate into the bread, and as it does, it absorbs nutrients. And eventually, class, the hyphae will grow upward and develop sporangia at the tips. So the clusters of more than 50,000 black sexual spores can develop within each sporangium, and the spores are released when a delicate sporangium ruptures, and the spores, class, give that black bread mold its characteristic color. So we won't quite get to this here. There is a video posted, class, to Canvas about here the genus Pilobolus that grows on animal dung. And as it grows in animal dung, class, it's most amazing, class, at how fast it accelerates. So please watch that video, because I aim to blow your minds. And I'm pretty sure, class, that this will blow your mind upon seeing it. So this is what I was just describing, class, as the bread is here today. The rhizoid class here anchors the sporangiophore class, of course, there to hold that sporangium. And of course, you then, class, have those spores, which are then dispersed, class, not just here or there, but all, class, A, everywhere. This class shows from a refrigerated class, those strawberries, which I love strawberries. In fact, I have brought some today for a bit of a snack or even lunch. But as you can see, class, the mycelium is there, and breaking down, class, those strawberries. So you really can only see that mycelium that's above. However, class, what's down beneath in the strawberry itself, class, will be those hyphae, breaking down the fungus by secretion, class, of those digestive enzymes. So there it is. So it's showing, class, how this occurs, the way in which Zygomycota goes through its entire life cycle, from spore to sporangium, and even, class, asexually here, class, asexual reproduction, meaning here from that haploid, class, to haploid, asexually, or going from haploid, class, to diploid, by using those gametangia here, and then ultimately, class, going through plasmogamy to go from this haploid to diploid stage by, of course, forming that mature zygospore within the zygosporangium, and then by the meiotic process going from this diploid back to the haploid stage, class, to eventually, class, produce, yet again, class, those zygospores. So here we're now, class, to the Glomeromycetes, class, found in Glomeromycota. To help you with these, class, I'll just be blunt. These, the Glomeromycetes, class, they have coenocytic hyphae, reproducing, class, asexually by way of blastospores, not blastopores, but blastospores. And then it just has not been found that these reproduce, class, sexually. So what makes these interesting, class, is that they're known as the arbuscular fungi. And overwhelmingly, class, you find these in the living plants. Meaning it says overwhelmingly, class, 80% of living plants have what are known as mycorrhizae. So yes, these are the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They are essential, class. I say again, these are essential to the world. And if you're saying, what do you mean by essential to the world? I mean that, class, that they are essential to ecosystem functioning, class, with mineral nutrient uptake by way of plants. So you're saying, class, the Glomeromycete, their class, within the arbuscle of a plant root cell. Notice, class, 2.5 micrometers, how small it is. So what happens, class, by these endomycorrhizae is that the hyphae can be thought of as those fingers pushing into, it says, a glove formed within the plasma membrane. I'm on page 611. Page 611. So because they penetrate the cell wall, these fungi are indeed referred to, class, as being endomycorrhizal fungi. So these endomycorrhizae, class, called the arbuscular mycorrhizae, because the hypha inside the root cell form branched tree-like structures, class, known as arbuscles. So that's why I said they are known as the arbuscular fungi. So what they do, class, is they create that site of nutrient exchange, class, between the plant and the fungus. So as it happens, class, in those mycorrhizal relationships, the root provides the fungus, class, with sugars. I'll just say with sugars, meaning it includes, class, amino acids and other organic substances, but by and large, the sugars. And of course, what happens is that mycorrhizal fungus then decomposes the organic material in the soil, and then it benefits that plant by extending class each of its roots. So what happens then, of course, is with the help of the mycorrhizal fungi, the plant can uptake class, I say, more nutrient minerals such as phosphorus and nitrogen. So it makes class the uptake of nutrients class more efficient. So this shows what I was stating just before. So we have the arbuscle class here in what is known as the root. So if you see above class, it says this is part of the cells in that root cortex, and even class that root epidermis. So the root class is here in the kind of tan color. We have the arbuscle class here in that cortex cell, and then what extends out class is that hypha. So those are the hyphae, and yet again the root habits there. Yes, there is also soil. So as I give you this picture class, it's the fungus that increases class the absorptive capacity of the root, and it does that class by increasing the surface area of the root in contact with the soil. And the very same way, it does then class ensure that mineral uptake from that soil is more efficient by taking in class that phosphorus and nitrogen, and of course, whereas that root itself then provides class that fungus with, of course, the sugars, the organics. Class, this is the essence of a symbiotic relationship. I say again, this is the essence of a symbiotic relationship, this mutualism class that occurs. So both of these benefit the fungus and the plant. So studies have shown class if a plant grows in a phosphate deficient soil or has a limited root system, its growth is enhanced by having this fungus here. So there you have it. So if you have questions about this, I would recommend you ask. I can't say enough, please ask, because this is what's occurring. Next up, class, we'll get to, of course, Ascomycota, the Ascomycetes. So here, class, they're also known as the sac fungi. You can see this class beginning here on page 612. So they comprise a large group of fungi with an approximate class 32,000 species known. And what they do include, class, are yeasts. It also includes mildews and most of that blue, green, or even the pink and brown molds that cause food to spoil. So we call these the cup fungi or sac fungi. And this group also includes, class, the edible morels and truffles, which I'll show you all in class. So here, class, the Ascomycetes, more than any other group of fungi, affect humans. And we're not quite there to discuss it, but what I will say is it's these fungi that are used to flavor cheeses, to bake bread, which I do love indeed, a good yeast roll that I make, and they are amazing. If I could make them, class, for you, I definitely would. However, due to not necessarily me knowing, but someone having an allergy or having an underlying allergy and may not know, I will not cook them for you. But if I could, I promise I would. And they are also used, class, to ferment alcohol. The very same way, class, some of these are used and enjoyed as foods, such as the morels and truffles that I mentioned, and even which, class, some Ascomycetes, class, are used to produce antibiotics. So we must have these fungi. And the very same way, class, some of these organisms are used as a model, class, for biologists to study cellular processes, including protein synthesis. And even which, class, some of these are used, class, by way of a plant in that symbiotic relationship, class, as mycorrhizae in the tree's roots. And then, of course, others of which, class, join with the green algae to form lichens. But then they can affect us negatively, the Ascomycetes class can. And the way in which they affect us negatively is by way of course, including us, by causing serious plant disease, such as the Dutch elm disease, which can really, class, well, not can, which has decimated, class, the, of course, population of those elm trees, the Dutch elm trees. Those elm trees, class, are gone by and large because, of course, Dutch elm disease. So ergot disease on rye, class, came from an Ascomycetes, and even, class, the powdery mildew that's happening to be on fruits and some ornamentals. And I guess I'll say one of the biggest of which, class, caused by the Ascomycota, is going to be, class, the chestnut blight, which has taken, class, chestnut trees, I would say, pretty much off the face of the earth. And I say pretty much off the face of the earth because they do not, class, exist as they once did prior to, class, the chestnut blight. So let's get now, class, to describing the sac fungi. So the reason the sac fungi, class, are called sac fungi is because on the structure class known as the ascus. By way of class, the sexual process, the ascocarp, produces class the ascospores. So the sexual spores class from Ascomycota are known as ascospores. So if you can make that connection class, we said the sexual spores of Zygomycota were known as zygospores. So the sexual spores class of Ascomycota are ascospores. Class, I'm giving you a test right now. Things to know. So the next portion class would be those asexual spores. So the asexual spores involve class what are the structures known as Conidia. I kind of gave you this earlier in the lecture. So the asexual spores class here in Ascomycota are known as Conidia. I did not say chlamydia. So to make it a bit more specific, I'll just show you all what these look like in photo. You will see this in lab class, microscopically. So what you're seeing here, class, are, of course, two different photos. They're the very same thing. However, what I'll make sure I say, class, as you do see this here, class, is that you're seeing penicillin. So what happens is that penicillin, which I try not to spend too much time here, penicillin class produces those things called Conidia, which are those very small asexually produced spores. And I kind of say they look like finger projections, or at least fingers or hands. And to get to this class, which I like to get to each semester, is that this is showing you class a petri dish. And to help you with it, I hope you see a difference, class, and from what you see there, I'll just help you out, class. That's, well, do you all know what that is? I'll pause and wait. If you don't know, I'll just wait just a moment here. And I guess what I'll do is I'll grab this blue. Then I'll say, do you see anything happening, class, in this area compared to what you all see happening in that area? And then I'll use one more color to make it hit home. So what happened here, class, is that it was once, class, unknown what's happening here in this petri dish. A long time ago, class, they called him Alexander Fleming. And I'll just get to it now, class. Fleming was a scientist. And what happened with Fleming, class, is just by accident, class, it was discovered that certain fungi, class, inhibit the growth of bacteria. So what you're seeing here, class, is just that. So if you look closely, class, what I've encircled in blue is, of course, Staphylococcus species. Yes, that's a bacterial species. So yes, it's growing here and thriving. But by mistake, class, Fleming left uncovered one of his petri dishes, which you're looking at, the actual picture. In green, class, you're seeing the inhibited growth of the bacterium, class, the Staphylococcus bacterium. In red, class, that's penicillin. So, by being the scientist that he was, he asked questions. He wanted to know why. What is it? What was it, class, that caused this? So, by way of that scientific process on the scientific method, class, it was ultimately discovered that penicillin, class, shown here in red, inhibited the growth, class, of certain bacteria, and in this case, it was Staphylococcus bacteria, and class, that led to the development of the first antibiotic. So, to say it this way, class, you don't have to be perfect for me. Just give me your best efforts. Because from the mistake that Fleming made, we now, class, have what are known as antibiotics. And it was used, class, even though, of course, the Second World War, to, of course, treat individuals that needed to be treated. And even you yourself, even though you might say I'm an anti-vaccine or anti-vax, I would say that it is likely at some point in time you had what is called not just a vaccine, but you've had, class, an antibiotic. If in fact you say I'm anti-antibiotics. I'm not saying that they have to be used, but I would say, class, there are situations in which they should be used, and this is the way that they were found. So just give your best efforts, class, in this course, and you'll do well, surely. But then again, if you happen not to, of course, give your best efforts, you will not do well. So I just wanted to make sure I introduced this because it's just directly related, class, to everything you're learning here. So I've already given you, class, these examples, and what I'll get to nextly is another photo, class, showing you all penicillin with the Conidia. And here, class, it shows microscopically, class. This is from figure 2914a. That's Baziza, a cup fungus, which you all will see in lab. And this specific class is Baziza badio confusa. And on the right-hand side, class, what you're seeing here is Asci. So you have an Ascus there, and you have yet another class Ascus there. So each of those Asci class, of course, contain of what is known as those 8 ascospores. So this is part of that entire structure class known as the ascocarp. And what you're seeing here, class, in this red is just one of those mini class ascospores. You will see this in lab class. So I'll keep on moving here, class, to show further photos, and then we'll get, class, to our last group, our 5th and final group class of fungi. These class are the Basidiomycetes class from Basidiomycota. So there are an approximate class 30,000 named species of Basidiomycetes, meaning this is that largest group and most familiar group of fungi. It includes, class, the puffballs, the bracket fungi, the mushrooms. I'll just stop it right there, even though the shelf fungi are included. So I'll get to, class, what makes them, I say, unique, meaning these club fungi as they're referred to colloquially. So the club fungi, class, by way of the sexual process, produce what are known as Basidiospores, and it all, class, comes from the Basidium. I'll show you this in lab and show you this, class, here shortly. So with that being the case, class, when you think of a fungus, it is likely, class, you're just thinking of Basidiomycetes, class, or Basidiomycota. So with this, it's going to be a 4-piece. I don't mean chicken, class, but I'm saying that it's going to be 4 Basidiospores developing, class, on each Basidium. So each Basidia, class, each of those Basidia produces 4 Basidiospores. So to get to this, class, there's an example, class, of a fungus there being shown. So to help you with it, class, this comes straight from the textbook. This is figure 2915. 2915A, class, is, of course, on the jack-o'-lantern mushroom. Figure 29, class 15B, is showing you, class, a stinkhorn, which has a very foul smell that attracts flies. And I hope you, class, can now see that evolutionarily those flies are used to, of course, disperse things. And then lastly, class, the turkey tail. This is a common bracket fungus. So you find this, class, on, of course, dead and living trees, and they produce the shelf fungus-like body. So to get to what I'm getting, I'm showing you this photo now. So yes, here, class, this shows a mushroom, and you have the peleus there. But what is on the underside, class, known as the gills. So let's go to the right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, class, it's now giving me this inset. So each of these gills, class, are lined with what are known as basidia. Each of those gills, class, they are lined with basidia. So let's go down a bit, and let's make it, class, even more plain. So each of these little finger-like projections you're seeing there, class, is a basidium. So there's a basidium there, another basidium, class, to the left of it, and then on each of those basidia, class, are those sexual spores produced, known as Basidiospores. So with that, I'll keep on moving, and I love photos. So yes, another picture, class, of a mushroom, and of course more shelf fungi, the bracket fungi, and then more puffballs that are here. So I hope that you all have noticed after rain, let's say it rained last night. If in fact it is rain last night, or even yesterday evening, class, once you woke up today, you will likely, class, see, if not mushrooms, most certainly puffballs, or even both, class, mushrooms and puffballs growing in your yard. Because of course, how quickly, class, fungi grow. And as stated here, class, this may have been seen by that fairy ring, meaning I'm not saying that you have to have seen it, but you very well, class, may have noticed a fairy ring, class, to occur in the lawn, or even, class, somewhere in the woods, the forest. And they may first appear, class, as that dark green ring surrounding that inner brown circle. They may be up to even, class, 51 feet in diameter. So it just consists, class, of grass and the well nourished by those nutrients released as a fungi, class, decompose the organic material. So grass dies, producing, of course, that inner brown circle, because the mass of mycelia decreases the movement of water in that area. And as the fungus, class, grows outward, the circle widens. So they may grow, class, a few centimeters or more per year. And after rainfall, as I mentioned, or irrigation, class, a ring of mushrooms may very well appear just outside, class, that ring in a green circle. So there you have it, you all. On your test, class, prepare yourselves, let's say, to describe the ecological and economic importance of fungi. I say again, class, on your test, please be prepared to describe both the ecological and economic importance of fungi. So most of which, class, fungi are those free-living decomposers absorbing nutrients from those organic wastes and dead organisms. Class, that's nothing new. So what I'm getting to here is that the fungi, class, as they are, they form a method, class, of breaking down many things. For example, many fungal decomposers, class, degrade not just cellulose, but also, class, lignified fibers. And I said lignified fibers, class. In what I'm saying there, class, is I'm referring to wood, W-O-O-D. Yes, fungi, class, are that amazing that they most definitely, class, can break down wood. So sometimes, class, there's cattle. I saw cattle this morning on the drive to work. But other grazing animals, they do not have enzymes, class, necessary to digest cellulose and lignin. However, class, they do have within them, class, fungi that inhabit their gut. So that gut fungi, class, of course, that is there, can then break down, class, those fibers, meaning, I said it again, that cellulose, class. And even in the case, class, with termites, and even some ants, class, they disperse the fungi, and then, of course, the fungi digest the leaves, in the case of ants, but of course, in the case of termites, the fungus, class, digests wood. And in the event, class, you don't know, when you do buy your first home, or buy your second home, or your third home, please make sure you pay for that termite bun, at least living, class, down here, lower than, or south of that Mason-Dixon line, because termites, class, can decimate a house, and they do swarm from time to time. But I find it, class, utterly amazing that what I'm sitting on, or sitting at, class, being this decimated wood, can be, class, broken down by, of course, the fungus. I already mentioned, class, once, of course, I'll get back to it, that fungi do indeed, class, decompose animal carcasses. They decompose, class, feces, branches, logs, and leaves. And as it happens, class, yes, they release CO2, that form of carbon, class. They bring back those minerals, class, to the soil. But all of these things, and even, class, water, must be recycled. So this is getting back, class, to those biogeochemical cycles. So without this continuous decomposition, class, essential nutrients will remain locked in huge mounds of animal carcasses. The feces, the branches, the logs, and even leaves. I mean, I couldn't imagine, class, seeing Chomper or Littlefoot still sitting out there. So we must have fungi. They're here, class, to ensure, I would say, the world goes around by recycling, class, those things we have to have, the water, class, the carbon, and minerals. So from here, I'll get to classes. I've already done, class, the Mycorrhizal Associations, so I won't do this yet again. What you're seeing here, class, this key experiment, in that it was hypothesized, class, in that low phosphorus soils that plants may form those mycorrhizal associations. Well, it was found that the growth of plants that form those mycorrhizal associations was significantly enhanced, and that they enhanced the growth of the western red cedar plants, as you're seeing here. So I just can't stress enough. You're seeing here, class, in A and B. In A class, there were no mycorrhizal associations, meaning this was serving as a control, as is taught, class, in Biology 1. In B class, you're seeing the same thing, class, meaning these were grown with, class, the mycorrhizal associations, and you can see just how well, class, that fungus aided the plants by just having those associations with the fungus. So the lichens, class, were up next. So what a lichen is just that combination of that fungus, class, either a cup fungus or a club fungus, meaning from Ascomycota or Basidiomycota, and that autotroph. So it may be very well, class, a cyanobacterium, or even class, a green algal species, the green algae. So typical of which, class, is that fungus forms most of the lichen thallus, and of course that photoautotrough, class, is what's bringing in that energy with carbon, class, for that fungus. So yes, it's a mutualistic behavior, a mutualistic, class, association. We would say both benefit, but it's not quite understood how it works. So here what I'll get to, class, is that lichens are often the first organisms to inhabit those rocky areas, meaning they secrete that acid that enters the rock and releases minerals. So the lichens, class, can be in one of three growth forms. Either that is crustose, that are flat and grow tight against the surface, that is foliose and look like a leaf, and then that is, class, frugitose, that grow erect and have many branches. So I won't spend a lot of time here, class, with what are known as sordaria. However, class, as I do mention the Sordaria, just keep in mind that when they are here, class, and they produce the Sordaria, this is here, class, to allow them to go from point A to point B, because they are, of course, those dispersed units, class, of lichens. So they break off, and if they land, class, on a suitable surface, they establish themselves and, of course, form new lichens. So Sordaria contains cells of both components. The Sordaria do. So this is, of course, the way in which it happens, class, asexually, meaning, and that's primarily, class, the way in which lichens reproduce, by way of fragmentation, releasing, class, Sordaria. So you have here, class, all three: the fructose lichen, the crustose lichen, and ultimately, class, the foliose lichen. And you've likely, class, seen a lot more foliose and fructose lichens, depending upon where you've been. So next up, class, I'll show photos yet again, and we will see these again today, or at least again when we have lab, whether the lab is today or next week or whenever lab may very well be. The fructose lichen, the crustose lichen as well. And there they are. So before I get to any form of an assignment, class, what I want to get to is going to be the economics here. So economically, class, what I'll say is that fungi, class, are worth money. You say money, oh, I say billions. So yes, these powerful enzymes are used, class, to decompose wastes and dead organisms, and even, class, reduce wood and fiber, class, to their basic components. Well, a lot of times, class, what can happen is they can be used, class, to provide beverages and food. So I'm confident, class, that you know that yeasts from the genus Zygomycetes, class, from the cup fungi and Ascomycota, can be used to produce wine, beer, and other fermented beverages. So wine is produced, class, when those yeasts, of course, ferment the sugar, and of course beer results when yeasts ferment sugar derived from starch and grains. Usually, class, it's going to be a barley. The very same way, class, baker's yeast is used to make bread and pizza. I'm a pizza king. It's called Papa's Pizza. And my son loved it. I had a bag of old yeast in the refrigerator, and I took it out, and he says, "Pizza, pizza." I said, "No, not today, buddy, because that yeast has been there for weeks." But of course, class, is used to make other wheat products. So during the process of making bread, the carbon dioxide that is produced by the yeast becomes trapped in those dough as bubbles, causing the dough to rise and giving, of course, leavened bread its light quality. So both carbon dioxide, class, and alcohol produced by yeast escape during baking. So the unique flavor, class, of cheeses such as brie, which I have in the refrigerator now that should be thrown away, or gorgonzola cheese, is produced by a species of penicillin. I like cheese a lot. And next up, class, is Aspergillus. The genus Aspergillus, class, is used, of course, and as tamari, class, is used in soy sauce. And I love soy sauce. In fact, I use soy sauce on my salmon before I put it on the grill. And it's the most amazing salmon, class, I've tasted in life. So just keep in mind that it also adds, class, the vital amino acids to both soybeans and the fungi themselves, because soy sauce is used, of course, by way of fermenting the soybeans with the fungi for at least those 3 months that are there. So these, class, show you those edible ones. So here, class, in A, being those yellow morels, and these, class, are found throughout North America. And in B, class, you're seeing 2921B, the white truffles. And I just can't stress enough that these are worth a lot of money. So keep in mind, class, you just can't eat a mushroom because you see a mushroom. Please know that even those edible mushrooms can be mimicked and look like, class, a poisonous mushroom. So I'll just say, please do not eat mushrooms found outside. So next up, class, I'll get to the antibiotics. It's not that you go to a store to buy antibiotics or go to a pharmacist to necessarily get the antibiotics. And I'm saying it in such a way that you understand that antibiotics, class, are found out in nature, out there in soil. There's nothing, class, that is necessarily going to be synthesized in a lab because they come, class, from the fungi themselves. So I'm not saying to not take antibiotics. I just say I hope that it's necessitated class by a physician, and that physician class is not treating, of course, some viral infection class by an antibiotic, because it's those class, bacterial infections, that are, of course, treated by use of an antibiotic. So, of course, a fungal infection class of the Anopheles mosquito can affect class development of the protist that causes malaria. So it could be that we use class fungi as a biological method of pest control to ensure class that the Anopheles mosquito does not continue to serve as that vector class for malaria. The same way class is in bioremediation, meaning like one time there was an oil spill. Well, it could be class that a bacterium or even class a fungus can degrade class those pesticides, herbicides, coal tars, and even class petroleum. So fungi class have a number of means in which they can be used. And then finally class, fungal diseases in humans. Well, almost finally. So ringworm class is not a worm, it's a fungal infection. And the same class is stated about athlete's foot, and even jock itch. Those class are infections class of a cup fungus from Ascomycota. So Candida is the very same way. And just keep in mind class that histoplasmosis that affects lung is in fact class of fungal disease. So to end things class, what I'll get to here is that black bread mold can kill you. Make sure class that if you happen to see mold class in the ceiling or see mold class along the baseboard of the house, please get out, because they could very well class get into your respiratory passages and of course not just cause infection, but of course lead to death in you class and death in me. So now I'll end class here with fungal plant diseases. So the powdery mildew. I mentioned the chestnut blight and Dutch elm disease already, but of course apple scab, wilt on potatoes, and brown rot class, which attach to the stony fruit as you see here, can most definitely class the decimated persons, of course, stand. And get now class, the club fungi, the Basidiomycetes class, that causes the rusts and smuts, attacks our grains, the corn, the oats class, the wheat. If this happens to, of course, get into, I guess I'll say that Midwest region class, corn like this doesn't sell. Corn like this class cannot be used to make any class ethanol. And even class the rust and smuts. So keep in mind that it's the fungi that can definitely class cause prices of things to skyrocket. Not just the price of fruit, but also class the price of gases. So in the test class, please be sure to be able to describe the economic importance as well as the ecological importance class of fungi. So I said both economic and ecological importance. So as you prepare for this on your test, I'm giving you class what will be that written portion of your test. I'm giving you right now what will be that written portion of your test. So just make sure, class, you can do that on the test, and also practice this prior to the test. So what I'm saying is in times like now, you all should be writing this out to be sure that you can exhibit the very same class on the test. Because the test, as it is, it'll be class in points class, half and half. Half of the points class will come from the multiple choice portion, and half of those points class will come from that written portion of the test. So if you have any questions class further, feel free to contact me class via email, by telephone, or even come into my office, or even before lab or after lab. Ask questions class about this lecture, or even of course questions class about any lecture, or what you'd be expected to class to exhibit on the test. So I thank you all for listening and taking notes. Please study this and study it well, and let's continue class to our next chapter. This has been your instructor class, Scholar Huff.